So this is one of the first pictures that I took. It's one of the last bits. The picture that I'm showing here now, there are some other pictures which are not in the garden of the consulate. So this one is the Battle of Magenta. The previous one was the Battle of La Sforzesca, which is nearby Milan. Since the sentence that this art historian Turin told me, so they look at battlefield, it was clear to me that I had to work with the landscape, because well, first because I started by chance and I started inside landscape. But the other reason is that landscape in Italy is it's a deep-rooted cultural aspect of Italian life. Of course, Italy is, if you think about it, the story of Italy, the history of Italy, you feel the Romans. So we have a lot of layers of history. You can see, for example, in the city it's very clear, but in landscape it's a little bit more challenging to find. But for me it was also important to look at the landscape to those places that in a way are a little bit far from the touristic routes. So they are excluded somehow from what a tourist would see. You would never go there, And also Italians don't know about, there are many streets that have this name, like Via Magenta or Montebello, but they cannot relate it to these battles and they don't even know where they are. So it was kind of interesting. And this work, it's an attempt to see, it is how can I say, a memory container. If you can show the collective memory of the inhabitants. So I don't know what I mean. I don't have an answer for that, because in a way, if I went there, I couldn't realize. The answer is no. But for someone else, could be yes. So for me, it's not a demonstration, but it's a research. So this is also a mapping of this piece of land that where this battle were fought. This is the last battle. It's a project, as you could see, and you can see it's 1860 ends in 1867. This is the Battaglia di Mentana. It's 30-40 kilometers out of Rome, and it's the last battlefield that I photographed. In which way did I work? I mean, I tried to give myself some precepts or headlines to accomplish the work, because for me it's very important. Usually I use the camera as a substitute. I mean, I like to think that the camera is recording something that the viewer will see in the same way that I had seen and I photographed. So I decided a priori to avoid people inside a frame, so you can't see any person in the pictures. And I decided, once I was in the battlefield, I decided to behave as if I were a soldier in the front line, or somebody, like in this case, like a general viewing or observing the conflict from above, as it happened many times. So, for example, this one really works because you can kind of imagine that these vineyards are the lines of people. I like to imagine that in the stage of my picture something was happening. So in some other, I used to use traces or elements of contemporary landscape which could obstruct the view, except like natural elements like fog, or like the one before, or barriers. This is, for example, Milignano, which is right outside of Milan, and this is the fence that separates the aeroporto di Linate from the country outside, which it's a wooden fence. I don't know, it's an element that reminds or gives the possibility to think about a little fortress or something, you know, something that the military, the army, or would like to conquer. Another element that accomplished, in my opinion, the work are the caption. I made a research, of course, because I had to find these battlefields, because I had to read. I read a lot of not books, but text, and I saw a lot of paintings, and also I read. I wanted the viewer to know some information about this battle. So and you can read this caption. Bonnie and I made a big work with them, so that sometimes they are kind of describing what happened during the clash. Some other times they are like an anecdote. Like, for example, one is telling you that Garibaldi was sitting on a bench eating bread and onions, which is not telling you that there were 100 people and 15,000 died or something like that, but it's telling you something that could happen at the time. This is in Novara. Actually, this is over the battlefield is right here behind, and here they build a military base. This is Pastrengo, which was one of the first battles that were fought in 1848. And this is another view, like this is Palestrina, it's 40 kilometers southern than Rome. And this is the Palestro, which another image is in the garden of the consulate. So I'm showing also this painting, which is a painting of the Battaglia, the Battle of Magenta. First, because I like to see that these trees are exactly those trees. So in a way, landscape is modified by people, and because this area is Magenta is 15 kilometers far from Milan, more or less, and it's city. But the reason why I show these paintings, first because I think it's a very interesting moment, because I took this picture more or less 150 years after these events. And this painting is not showing the climax of the battle. It's just showing the injured after the clash. So you see the clash right in the background. You see these figures here in the foreground. But it's not a topic moment, because usually we refer to the battle or a battlefield at the climax of the event. So when there's a winner or a loser, but usually we don't think about all what is around the conflict. So here you can see it, because you see the injury coming back to the Italian side of the battlefield. The other side is of the Austrians. And you can tell from here, looking at this painting, how big is the battlefield. I mean, this is a very short part, because a very small part. But you can see, you can tell that in the depth, there is a big, because the battlefield is not only the front line or the outer lines, but it's also some places where the injured people were brought once they were, or for the dead people. You know, it's a very big one. And for example, the one in magenta was about 25 kilometers big, wide. So it's pretty big. So this is magenta, campo di battaglia di magenta, and you can see how, I mean, I don't know, because you don't know exactly, for example, November, okay, but you can have an idea. So these are the maps I look and I studied on. So this is still magenta, which was a battle fought with the Italian and the French against the Austrians. So, as we said, we saw paintings, we saw pictures, photographs, and we saw. So we can consider a battlefield in different way, you know, like a topographical subject, a landscape, but we have to consider first that it's a real place. This iconic representation of the Risorgimento is related to paintings and not to photographs. So those photographs, the photographs that I took after this long jump of 150 years, are kind of unusual because there isn't a photographic representation of the battlefields. Just a few. A French guy and this guy from Rome called Lecchi that photographs this era in 1849 during this Repubblica Romana, Roman Republic, that lasted for a year more or less. This is the Ponte di Cavour in Rome now. This picture is a picture that I downloaded from Google Earth. This is the same place in the 1887, but you see there's a big difference. And this is the same place 150 years of the unification of Italy. So you see they changed it in 300 years. The building still exists. That building there with the 3 windows, with the arch, is there, and is here. So the sign of the caste are often present, and this is one of the reasons also of my work, to show how history and the past is always present in our life. So I'm making a little bit of a kind of a digression about the work to introduce the other work of mine, which is related to the Through the Window project that were mentioned by Bonnie and Adriana. So this is a view. It's called. This is a painting from Canaletto.